Hey, so I'm really excited today to talk about the 20th anniversary of Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? And you might ask, why am I excited about this book? Well, because this is the old one. And this came out while I was at Mount Holyoke, and Beverly Tatum was my mentor. And the story I always tell is she is the reason why I do what I do, and I tell all my students to go to office hours, because she was teaching my Intro to Psych class and talked about her work on Black families and white communities, and it was my life. Like, that was my life growing up. We were a Black family in a predominantly white community, and I had never realized that people did research on that experience. And so she said, come to my office hours. I did, and I say the rest is history, because while I was there, she was working on this book. And if you look in the back, I'm in the acknowledgments for this one. And it really changed the way that many people understand adolescent development. Racial identity theory has been around since the 70s, but she really made it applicable. And what happened is she was getting called to different schools and to talk with teachers and principals, because they were asking the question, like, why are all the Black kids sitting together in the cafeteria? And she used racial identity theory to help explain to people how developmentally kids think about themselves in terms of race, right? So racial identity is simply how people think about themselves in terms of race, and how that develops, how that shapes how someone's thinking about themselves will influence their behavior. So why are all the Black kids sitting together in the cafeteria? Do we ask that same question of why all the football players are sitting together in the cafeteria, or why all the cheerleaders sit together, or the drama people, or the orchestra or band folks? We don't typically ask that question, right? Because we understand that developmentally it's appropriate and it feeds them to be with people who have like interests and who they maybe don't have to explain their jokes, their inside jokes, right? And the same thing can happen for Black kids, especially in predominantly white environments where they don't have to explain things, whether it's about their hair or an interaction that they had with a teacher or a classmate. They're just accepted. Now, that doesn't mean that it's all easy being a teenager nowadays at all. But from a psychological perspective, Tatum is known for helping us understand why all the Black kids are sitting together at the cafeteria. So I was super excited when I spoke with her a few years ago, because she talked about doing a 20th anniversary edition. She was still president at Spelman, and so had her plate full doing wonderful things there and fundraising and doing all the work that was necessary to continue to build the legacy there. And then I got a call maybe last fall, and they wanted to talk to me about how I'd use the books in my classroom. So I took Tatum's Psychology of Racism class at Mount Holyoke and continued to teach a version of that class, an adapted version of that class, as I have taught now for 14 years. And so I was asked how I use that book in my classes. And I not only use it in my Psychology of Racism class, but I taught a first-year seminar on understanding race in whatever year it was. So understanding race in 2011, 2012, and this was a key text. So I got a call to ask, could I talk about how I used the book and how it had shaped my thinking, and was really excited to see how all of that got integrated into the book. So here we are with the 20th anniversary edition. So we have old and new, or maybe more like this, old and new. And what's great about this, you might ask, 20 years, so much has changed. But what's beautiful about this is Tatum frames what's happened in these past years, whether it's thinking about Obama being elected, or thinking about the rise of colorblind racial ideology, even thinking about Trump and just millennials. And there's so much history, the Black Lives Matter movement and movement for Black lives more broadly. She does a beautiful job of weaving all of that history into the front part of the book to set the stage because the reality is these theories of racial identity development, how people of color, white folks, people who are multiracial, people of different social identities, period, because now we have developmental models of gender and gender identity, religion, sexual orientation. So how we make sense of our identities, ourselves, so shapes how we come to conversations, how we interact with people in our lives, and basically the shape of our society. And so she does a great job of showing us basically how this theory is still relevant and can be a window not only to understanding ourselves, but understanding other people and our interactions with other people. And so even though this is based on a book from 20 years ago, she frames it and makes it relevant for today. And not only in her weaving of the stories of what's happened in the interim, but also many of the chapters have updated research and bring it up to date so that you can see how the core of these questions about self and identity and how that influences us and our thinking and our interactions is so relevant and remains a gem for ourselves and our intergroup interactions even today. So I encourage you to read Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria and Other Conversations About Race by Beverly Daniel Tatum. I would say grab the old and the new. And what I like most about this book is how useful the information is. You can apply this information to your everyday life. You can apply it in the context of relationships and work with children. It's so widely applicable. Feel free to let me know your thoughts, your ideas, questions that you have. I want to just remind us that part of what we want to do here is not just analyze what's happening, but also think about what can we do differently? How can we build something different? I think Tatum gives lots of examples, especially in her later chapters, where she talks about our sphere of influence and how do we understand our sphere of influence to be able to act on the information that we have so that we can create new practices. She also has her famous analogy of a walkway, a moving walkway like the one that we have in the airport, the one that kind of moves us along. We have to realize that the systems and the way things are built in our society are moving us in a particular way. And so simply to say, oh, that's unfortunate isn't enough. Even to turn around isn't enough. We actually have to move at a speed faster than the walkway to make a difference. And some people say, well, oh yeah, you could get off, you could build a new walkway, you could re-engineer it. It's those sorts of ideas that I'm curious about. Another analogy that is often used from her text is this idea of racism being like smog in the air, that it's out there and we're all breathing it in. And so if we can understand how it impacts all of our quality of air, that we can spend less time worrying about blame and more time thinking about how do we clean up the air and what do we need to do so that we don't continue to breathe smog. So clearly this book gets me excited because I know the author and I love the material. It's work I've been thinking about for 20 some years. But what else do you want to hear my thoughts about? What books are you reading? What gets you excited? So feel free to like the channel, let me know in the comments, and we'll see you next time.